So there's a particular very specific thing that came out of this. Okay, if you guys have heard of this, it's an amazing story. And in when they were setting up the actual Allied invasion, again a counter invasion of the European theater through France, there was a particular army. They were known as the Ghost Army, and they're the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops is what they were actually specifically called. Now this is going to get good. Don't worry. We're gonna get into weird stuff because troubled minds and all the rest. But we'll start here. We'll start at this particular spot because this is a wild one when you start to think about the consequences of this and what this might mean in the modern day. Okay, so now the Ghost Army. So this is straight from Wikipedia. Was a United States Army Tactical Deception Unit during World War II, officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The 1,100-man unit was given a unique mission: to deceive Hitler's forces and mislead them as to the size and location of Allied forces, while giving the actual units elsewhere time to maneuver, which is obfuscation at its finest, right? Which is fantastic. That's what you want to do. You end up saving lives by confusing the enemy, right? It's the proverbial art of war, if you've ever read that by Sun Tzu. It's, appear weak when you were strong, appear strong when you were weak, this type of stuff, right? To kind of bait them in or to keep them at bay and, just obfuscation, okay? A very, very ancient tactic, and it's not something, new here. But the incredible part about this is it was used to great success by this Ghost Army of the Allied forces. And so specifically, there's some amazing things that came out of this. And if you guys haven't heard of this, this is one of those ones it's incredibly weird because of this. The story, specifically, this is from Wikipedia, and I'll get into some other stuff that's not Wikipedia in a sec. But this particular story about the Ghost Army was kept a secret for more than 50 years after the war. More than 50 years until it was declassified in 1996. Okay, the unit was the subject of a PBS documentary called "The Ghost Army" in 2013. Okay, now the wild part about this is, YouTube blocked it. What's up? Okay, anyway, I can't check the chat over there. I see you guys in the chat though. I'll come say hi momentarily. Okay, so I thought somebody said we were blocked on YouTube, so I freaked out. But anyway, okay, so you get it, right? This was classified until 1996. Amazing story. But think about how long they kept that under wraps, even long after this situation resolved itself, okay? Now, here's a few of the amazing things that this Ghost Army did. If you guys are not familiar with this story, your socks are going to be blown off. If you are familiar with this story, I think you're still going to dig this because this is incredible. So, number one, the purpose of the Ghost Army was designed to deceive the enemy, like I said, by creating illusions and spreading misinformation, thereby misleading German forces about the size, strength, and location of Allied troops. The tactics they used, of course, were inflatable tanks, vehicles, and artillery to create the appearance of troop buildup and movement. They also employed sound effects and radio transmissions to simulate the presence of large forces. Think about how incredible that is. The composition of this, the unit was 1,100 soldiers, as I said, including artists, designers, sound technicians, and other creative professionals. Think about that. It's like a traveling bard troupe that was sent out into a war-torn theater to basically fake like they were moving troops around. I mean, absolutely wild to consider that's a thing and even possible. So their operations, of course, were, as I described, they participated in over 20 missions across Europe, including the Battle of the Bulge and crossing the Rhine River. They are estimated to have saved thousands of lives through their deception tactics, including, of course, leading up to that initial Normandy on June 6th. And, of course, we all know how that ended up. The bad guys lost that one. Eventually. And so the weird part is, again, this is the thing that comes to mind, and we'll layer this in as we go, because I think there's a whole bunch more here to consider regarding this specific thing, because the secrecy of this was nuts. Again, the unit's existence and operations were classified for more than 40 years, and it wasn't until, it says the late 90s here, but it says on Wikipedia it was, 1996, when they actually declassified this and made it public. So look, so my point is, talking about this is, one, let's not, thank you, appreciate that, James, for the sound check. So let's not forget where we came from. And as I always say, this show is about standing on the shoulders of giants and honoring where we came from before, okay? And certainly this is one of those pivotal moments in history where things happened, and a world terrified by, well, by true tyranny stood up against it. And so anyway, I mean, take that as you will. I think it's important to not forget these things. Like I said, we may be without some of these veterans coming up in the next, several years here, because they're all, again, some of them even, here's so many amazing stories. And I've been listening to this stuff on the radio all day. Everybody's talking about this, of course, like I said, which is where we typically zig when everybody else zags, but we're going to zig along with them and except do it troubled mind style. But so many incredible stories, including specifically people that were, lying on the draft cards saying, they were like 16 or 15 and they were saying they were 18 so they could get in there and take a shot at the Germans. I mean, just incredible batch of stories with this, and none more incredible than this ghost army. Okay, so now keep in mind as we go, we're going to get into UFOs tonight specifically because I think there's a thread here that is probably going to be missed that most people will not talk about in this regard because we're UFO enthusiasts and that whole bit. So we're a little weird in our own right, and that's fine by me. But you get the idea, right? So can you really keep anything classified for nearly 50 years without a hint of it getting out? Interesting, because it takes us right back to 1947. It takes us right back to Roswell, New Mexico, and that supposed UFO crash and the National Security Act that happened a month after in 1947. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that kind of plays. But the bizarre part to me, specifically, is that they kept it under wraps for so damn long, especially after the fact that this was resolved. So why, unless they were still doing this in other places, why would they have kept it as classified as they did? So that's the question that's on my mind tonight. We're going to get into UFOs and some other stuff, but and talk about a little bit more about this ghost army, because just the incredible things they did were talk about brass balls. I mean, they're out there in places where they could get turned on and shot by actual Nazis that are trying to kill them, and they're like a traveling circus bard troupe, just trying to make noise and absolute insanity. If they got turned on, they were dead. They were out there risking their necks like everybody else to obfuscate and create the illusion of tactical movement. How nuts is that? Anyway, so keep that in your back pocket as we go tonight. And of course, not just the idea of that, but the deception mission. And the deception mission, not just at wartime, and specifically how this kind of gets into the modern day, because I think there's a parallel here. And so hang tight on that. So the first question for you guys tonight is, have you heard of this ghost army? What do you think this is? Do you think they're still doing things like this becomes the question, right? And how, I don't know, if you want to talk a little bit about World War II, maybe some of our grandparents fought in that or whatnot, whatever. All that's on the table tonight if you guys want to be part of it. What's up? So back to the ghost army. Now, again, wild stuff is part of this. Remember, so they were out there in a theater of war, actually obfuscating all kinds of wild stuff, okay? Using inflatable tanks, sound trucks, fake radio transmissions, scripts, pretense, the whole bit. Now, there's a little bit more of this that is absolutely wild, specifically this. Now, here's what they did. And this is the incredible part, because think about this. If we're all creative types, consider yourself a creative type if you don't consider yourself one. How amazing would it be to pull off something like this? I know exactly which team I would be on. But so number one, they used inflatable decoys. So the unit used these inflatable tanks, planes, artillery, and other vehicles made of rubber and canvas to create the illusion of a large military presence. These decoys could be quickly deployed and were often positioned in strategic locations to fool enemy reconnaissance. And that's one of the main ones. And that's famously, I did know about this before the entire Ghost Army bit came out. We knew they were trying to fool each other. It is what they do in theaters of war. It's what they do even today with a certain, let's say, radar spoofing. We've talked about Project Palladium from the late 50s, early 60s, when they were radar spoofing Soviet aircraft with UFOs and this type of thing, actually making them see UFOs on their radar that they couldn't catch up to. Anyway, there's a long history of this, of us trying to fool each other in the theater of adversary and war and all the rest. But back to this now. Wildly enough, here's what they also did. The sound deception part of this is the team I certainly would have been on. So the Ghost Army had a specialized sonic deception unit that used powerful speakers and sound effects they recorded to simulate the noise of moving troops, tanks, and other equipment. they would often play these sounds at night to create the impression of a large army on the move, which means, of course, they had these massive speakers on the backs of these trucks, and they would drive slowly as if they were at the speed of tanks, kind of rolling slowly through the countryside, so that this could be heard miles and miles away. And so, yeah, think about that. And so if you were in 2 towns over or something, and kind of the word spreads incredibly quickly that the Allies are on the move, they're headed northwest or whatever, then that's the sort of the information that gets out if there's any spies in the neck of the woods. But then also they set this stuff up, these inflatable decoys, to fool the actual reconnaissance overhead. And what they were doing, the actual aerial reconnaissance, but what they were doing, which is another wild part of this, is they were acting like they were in a massive hurry in some cases, meaning that they inexpertly camouflaged some of the, phony decoys so that they could see them, kind of like a sloppy camouflage job, right? Just barely enough where it wasn't like perfectly covered. So if, anyway, giving themselves away a little bit because they want to be seen a little bit, right? But anyway, so they would also use these fake radio transmissions with these skilled radio operators, and they would mimic the radio traffic of real units, using authentic military jargon, of course, and codes to convince the Germans that they were intercepting communications from a larger Allied force. And then this is where this gets very band on the run or whatever. So the visual deception aspect. So they had artists and designers in the unit that would create fake insignia, patches, and markings to impersonate other units. They would also use camouflage and other visual tricks to conceal the true size and nature of their operations. And as I said, even imperfectly, so as to appear like they were in a massive hurry to get somewhere. And, then the enemy thinks, oh, we got him. Look, they made a mistake here or whatever. But yeah, anyway, so this ends up being in the larger theater of war, an actual specific and direct theatrical performance on the battlefield. I mean, think about how insane that is. And, well, is this still happening today? So back to with the theatrical stuff. So some members of the Ghost Army had backgrounds in acting and would stage theatrical performances in local towns and villages to spread misinformation and gather intelligence from the locals. And of course, they had something that they would call atmosphere creation. And the unit would simulate the atmosphere of a large army by hanging out laundry, playing sports, and driving trucks around to create dust clouds, all to give the impression of a bustling military camp. Now, if that's not nuts, incredibly nuts in the best way, I don't know what is. This is absolutely amazing that they got away with this and actually did the obfuscation effect with actually saving lives and keeping the enemy guessing all the time. But yeah, so it got me thinking. Okay, so I was listening to these amazing stories today on the radio as I'm driving around about, of course, Normandy and World War II. But it got me thinking about how sort of when your back is against the wall and you have to win, right? You have to win. That this is the type of stuff that people come up with. We are ever creative, okay? And in this particular sense, this was a coordinated effort by a group of artists, of all things, in a theater of war that were, well, causing mischief and havoc. And I mean, just unbelievable stuff. But it got me thinking, of course, in a larger context. And so if this is the type of stuff that we can crank out in a minute when we need it, of course, heavy planning went into this and all the rest, but in wartime and, everything's kind of just go, because you can't waste a minute or, if you're a minute behind, you lose. But in this sense, is it something that's been happening since 1947 with us? And the idea of this, not just a UFO ghost army, I'm calling this, but the obfuscation of ideas, the obfuscation of what UFOs are technologically. And, we talk about UFOs as if they're real here because that's, I mean, certainly unidentified flying objects themselves are real. Okay. Are they aliens from Alpha Centauri? I don't know about that. And so that becomes the weird thing here when you start to look at the larger context, which of course is information operations and this military deception bit. And we've talked about info ops. It's basically, they used to call it a PSYOP, right? A psychological operation. It's now turned into info ops is the new term for this. But so military deception is one thing, but then when you're using sort of disinformation tactics on let's say the zeitgeist at large, it becomes a whole different space. And what I'm talking about specifically is these UFOs. And 1947, Roswell, if you recall, they tried to cover it up with the, what was it, General Ramey or Major Ramey? Who was it? I can't remember who the guy was that took the sheepish picture after the supposed alien crash, and he had like this, batch of tinfoil looking kind of goofy. And I mean, it's hard for me to look at that picture and not see just like that guy feeling like a goofball, right? Like, okay, well, yeah, here's what we found, guys. It's all this tinfoil on the ground, right? The weather balloons, which again, probably was not the case entirely. And so, well, it is disinformation, and it is not just disinformation to keep us off the track of conflict or direct adversaries. Let's say it would be at the time, maybe it would have been the Soviet Union, kind of that thing ratcheting up as it gets into the Cold War. But who really knows, okay, regarding that and what they were thinking and what they were doing when they look at this stuff. But basically what they were able to do by the UFO, what is it, the Roswell record, I believe, is where this article came out. And again, I'm not going to be on camera tonight, guys, just because I just holding my head like I got an ice pack on my head. So I'm going to just do this radio style. So bear with me. And when I put headphones on, it hurts. So I'm going to try and do this kind of a different way. But anyway, so just so you know, so if you're waiting for me to grace your presence, I'm probably not going to tonight. I'm going to just worry about sounding good and not looking good. How about that? But anyway, so back to this. Now, the information operations is something that, let's say directly, if you're trying to fool the people of this country, okay, which again is in many cases certainly unethical, being fooled by our own military industrial complex as worn by the great Dwight Eisenhower. But beyond that, it's also illegal, right, in some sense, until they've made it legal, right? But clearly it's one thing to fool adversaries in a theater of war, but it's another thing entirely to basically fool entities that are, well, not foreign, but domestic. And here, we're those entities, not the aliens, not the non-human intelligence we're always talking about. We are those entities that are being fooled through possible zeitgeist manipulation. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Specifically, that this information gets out, people talk about it, the Roswell record comes out, there's, the story of the alien ships, crash landed, they've got alien bodies, all the rest, okay? But then they kind of pump this information out or curate it in just a certain way, or even maybe they planted some of these stories into the UFO flap in Washington as a particular thing to not just, let's say, keep this narrative rolling, which has been rolling for 70, 80 years now, but beyond that, you can kind of poison the zeitgeist. Because notice, after Kenneth Arnold saw the flying saucer back in 1947, then you had the UFO crash at Roswell, and then everything just kind of spiraled out of control after that. And it's been this sort of on and off nursing aspect of UFO zeitgeist stuff ever since. And we're back to it again with new whistleblowers, with Lou Elizondo, David Grush, these guys, Christopher Mellon, if you guys have been following any of those shenanigans. And look, I'm not even making determinations there. I'm just wondering if in a larger sense here, that we are poisoning the zeitgeist with stories exactly like this, okay? Even with, dare I suggest it, fake whistleblowers, okay? And I'm suggesting, all right? We have to keep all the options open, and I'm not calling anybody a liar. It's not my way. It's not what I do here. But the point is that how deep does this go and how weird does it get? Because if we're considering the idea that we're being fooled by poisoning the zeitgeist as I described, then a lot of things certainly are not as they seem. And that to me is the first part, the first and foremost bit of this. And it does trace us all the way back to where we started here tonight with that, the Ghost Army. Okay. So I was thinking about it as I'm driving around today. And of course, the idea of the UFO Ghost Army came to mind. And in this case, it's not actually trying to fool our adversaries directly. Unless, of course, you're talking about, like I said, Project Palladium, radar spoofing the Soviet pilots back in Cuba and other places back in the, I believe it's late 50s, early 60s. You can look into that. I'll have the article up in a moment here as well. But that's the deal, okay? But that's one thing. But poisoning the zeitgeist, or let's say curating it perfectly so we get, well, we're still talking about UFOs, aren't we? How many years later? And some people are emphatically sure that there's no such thing as UFOs and they aren't real and it's just some trick of the mind or whatever. And other people have experienced them directly, experiencers, as we say, and would say emphatically the exact opposite. No, they're real. They're here, and they're doing really wild stuff, including and up to the alien abduction phenomenon. So which part is it? And which part of this has been sort of pressed out as a propaganda aspect to poison the zeitgeist and keep weirdos like us interested in things we shouldn't be interested in? You get my meaning here? And that's where my mind's at. That takes us kind of about where we need to be. And it's, again, it's just propaganda. But think about the back to the Ghost Army in World War II. And so specifically, when they were, I'll end it here, and we'll take the break and then to start taking some calls. But specifically, they had Patton, right, the famous Patton, General Patton, sidelined because he had smacked some shell-shocked troops, and it, I mean, clearly looked bad. You know what shell shock looks like. These people are shaking. They are so psychologically broken that they cannot be coherent in any way, shape, or form because they've seen too much death. They've seen too much just carnage. And Patton, being the hard ass that he was, so what did they name him? Old what was his nickname? George S. Patton. What was his name? Old Iron Guts. Was it Iron Guts? What they call the guy? Anyway, it was something like that. Hold on. It's too good to miss his actual nickname. What is this? Old Iron Guts or something like this? Old Blood and Guts. I don't know. I'll dig it out in a sec here. But anyway, just a little history there, which is hilarious. But not so hilarious was him, attacking people, some of his own troops, smacking them, and so he got sidelined. And so to kind of wrap the story up, he got sidelined during the war because of this particular incident, and then they used him as part of this obfuscation technique because he was noted by, of course, the Nazi high command as a very capable general. So they staged him in another part with this psychological operations team, or this ghost army, and sat him across the bay. And the Nazis were nearly certain that if they were going to come, they were going to come with Patton. And so they were looking that way. And so they had to spread their troops out, as you would expect from, again, when you're, again, back to, the art of war, is that when you are weak, appear strong, and vice versa, okay? And that's what they did. So since Patton was sidelined, they moved him over there and sat him there. And he was, well, part of the ruse. And it saved a ton of lives because the actual Nazis couldn't catch up to this. And it had to flex all of their defenses to basically stop all of the possibilities. And so amazing stuff anyway. What an incredible story here, the Ghost Army and the tactical deception they used. But it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder about this in a zeitgeist perspective. And that's what's on my mind tonight. I hope you guys are all doing well. Like I said, still got a bit of a headache and still trying to keep things from spinning out of control by turning my head in particular directions. So like I said, I'm going to just stay off camera for tonight, and hopefully everything will heal itself over the weekend. I'm still stretching and doing all the things I should do. But anyway, so what do you know about this? The UFO Ghost Army. How weird is this? And do you think that there's the larger context of this exact thing they're using against us in some capacity? And that becomes really the narrative tonight and the question on my mind. Not just the amazing story of 80 years ago today, but the larger context of, is this maybe something that they've been using against us through folklore and through the media and through the newspapers and all the stuff that we've been talking about over the years of Troubled Minds as well. And I don't know, a lot of things to consider here, and we'll get into some other wild ideas as part of it, of course. But of course, how else could you go wrong with calling this show the UFO Ghost Army?